Hello, everyone watching today. So I'm Disha Gosalia, Customer Success Executive at Freshworks. And joining me today is Micah Solomon. So welcome to the day 8 of 12 Days of Refresh community. Let me take some time here, like a few minutes, to introduce Micah. Micah Solomon is a top consultant, trainer, and e-learning producer helping businesses with their customer service, customer experience, and company culture. Called the new guru of customer service excellence by the Financial Post, Micah is a renowned entrepreneur, business leader, and author. Micah Solomon's techniques and achievements have been featured everywhere from Fast Company to Wall Street Journal, radio, and Inc. magazine's customer service makeover feature. He's also legendary for having contributed over 500 articles on customer service and customer experience to Forbes. So if you are in the customer service business, you wouldn't have missed him at all. Recently, Micah authored Ignore Your Customers and They'll Go Away, which has been recognized as one of the groundbreaking customer service books of recent years, which, Micah, you still owe to send it to me.
Sorry.
And and recently, he's an entrepreneur and business leader himself. He was also an early investor in some of the technology now known as Apple Siri. So I guess we all can blame him for that. All right, Micah. So let's get started here. A popular topic among a lot of CX and CS professionals involves turning upset customers around and creating delightful experiences for unhappy customers. So for most of us, handling unhappy customers, that can be a bit scary, right? One phone call from an upset customer can pretty much make you rethink your job. Um, but sadly, unhappy customers are inevitable, but I also think it's an amazing opportunity, right? It's a proven fact that customers tend to be more loyal to your business after they've experienced a service failure than if that had never happened in the first place. They call this the service recovery paradox. And it means that there's a real possibility for all of us to turn the whole situation around with an unhappy customer and make them stay and even adore us. Is that right, Micah?
Sorry, I was turning off my heater because it was too loud. It's a little chilly here. It is true if you successfully practice service recovery. Absolutely.
All right. Yeah. And then that's a very valuable strategy, right? I think you were going to talk about like one of your mama techniques here.
So it is absolutely true. Now, it is a weak correlation, so you don't want to introduce problems into your processes just to solve them. There is a hotel chain that is so good at service recovery that their CEO once joked that, because the key cards don't work sometimes anyway, maybe he should but they're so good at running up to your floor and giving you champagne or whatever it is that maybe they should make a few more key cards break. And he was just kidding, but he has never been able to live down that comment. So don't try to have mistakes just to solve them. But if you do get fantastic at it, it has been shown that you will have a better chance of that customer bonding with you and becoming an ambassador for your brand. Now, every service-oriented company has a framework for service recovery. It's really important because if you don't practice this and know what you're going to do ahead of time, I'm sure Disha can back me up on this, then when you're faced with an upset customer, you feel like you're just improvising at that point. So Marriott's framework spells learn, Learn, listen, and so forth. Starbucks's adorably spells latte, Latte, listen, acknowledge, and so forth. Mine, the one I'm known for, spells mama, M-A-M-A, and it builds on the great work of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, but I have adapted it to a wider variety of contexts, including tech companies and so forth. Now, my promise with mama is if you learn this ahead of time, then the next time a customer is breathing down your throat or through their terminal or on the phone line, what is it, breathing down your neck, sorry, you won't feel like falling on the floor in a fetal position and calling out, mama, please help me, there's a scary customer here. Step number 1, make time to listen. That's the first M, right? Immediately stop whatever you're doing. Listen with your ears, your eyes. I know that sounds funny, but it's important. And your body. Don't interrupt the customer with questions or explanations. Don't do it. Now, I have heard people, especially you gentlemen out there, that this is also a good technique for personal relationships. However, I can't prove it because when I interrupt my wife with explanations, of course she hates that. But if I don't, she says, "Oh, Micah, you're just mama-ing me." So I can't tell whether or not it
She
works.
knows you too well.
What'd you say?
I said she knows you too well.
Yeah, exactly. She's seen this presentation once or twice.
Yeah.
But with a customer, you don't want to interrupt them. You want to let them speak. And this is so important because most of us are pretty good troubleshooters and problem solvers. And the moment the customer starts talking, we're like, oh, we know how to fix that. But you don't. You got to let them get there with you. Only after listening quietly, strive to learn more about the situation by probing for what the customer is specifically upset about. And that's really important because you very likely think it's the delay with their order or so forth, but it might be that they're not happy about how someone talked to them. So let them speak. Now, once you've done that, we get to step A. I'm in the first A. Now you get 2 A's for the price of 1 here. Acknowledge and, if called for, apologize. So acknowledge the situation and, if called for, apologize. Now, by that, I mean that the customer would feel it's called for, not that you necessarily feel you did anything wrong. Even if you feel you have no reason at fault, you should convey to the customer that you regret what they've gone through. Now, if you are going to apologize, make sure it is a sincere sounding apology and not it's through your gritted teeth and so here are 3 perfectly good apologies. I'm so sorry that this happened, right? You're sorry that this happened. Gee, if it hadn't happened, you wouldn't be having to be talking to this person, right? So I'm so sorry this happened. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. I'm going to kill the person who wrote our manual. No, whatever it is. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. Or I'm so sorry we let you down. All 3 of those I think are great. The third one's the only one that says we did anything wrong, right? But they are all apologies. Now, I'm so sorry that you feel that way. Or even worse, I have had someone at a company say, well, Mr. Solomon, I'm sorry if you feel that way. That is a fake apology. And I'm sorry, I had other jobs that took priority. Now, that might be true, but say it with me. It is not an apology. All right. The second M is have a meeting of minds. Align yourself with the customer's expectations for what a solution would look like, and then what's realistic for you to get down. And once the 2 of you agree that that would work, spell it out so there's no further misunderstanding, right? We don't need a new misunderstanding. Most importantly, say what you're going to do and by when. Then all we've got left is the A, act and follow up. Okay, so I didn't want to make this MAMA because I didn't think it sounded good as an acronym. So I went with MAMA, but I snuck in that follow up. So act, most important, of course. Take care of the issue as promised. Follow up with anyone, your colleague or your employee, or even your boss, to whom you've assigned all or part of the resolution. I mean, it could be your boss, right? Oh, he insists on hearing from you, Ms. Boss. But is Ms. Boss really going to call your upset customer? You need to follow up, make sure it happened. Follow up with the customer to ensure all is well also. And then later on, within your company, it's ideal if you have a way to log all of these problems or perceived by a customer problem, because you may be able to improve things systematically. The aim of service recovery. Well, of course, the aim is to make things right. But ultimately, the higher aim is to change the feeling the customer takes home. The goal should be to replace the story your customer is telling themselves with a new and better story. Thank you guys so much. That's my mama method. Now, Disha has
Love it.
even more
Shorter.
memorable one. So go for it.
No, Mike, I love it. I think remembering that, when you're in a situation, just having an acronym when there's stress around, I think it's really valuable for, customer service agents and reps. I recently heard another, and it's similar principles, but it's called the DDD Framework. So it starts with 3 Ds. First is disarm, which is acknowledge, just let them talk, let them vent out. And I think in this phase, it is very important. Obviously, starting with an apology, the way you said, of, hey, I acknowledge that something is wrong, not taking blame, but then asking them questions on how they feel, and really letting them talk and vent out, and not jumping to the next phase, because I think we all, as customer service people, want to jump into resolution and solutioning. But yeah, it is very important. It's hard to do, but it's very important to let them vent out. Yeah, that's kind of what I do with my toddler as well, or when I had toddler, right? You everyone who's had toddlers would know that, there is a time when you just have to let them vent, let it out. And then you go to the next step, which is diagnose. That's a second D, research with urgency. So it's important that they understand that this is urgent for you, no matter what the experience previous is going to be. Now they're talking to the right person, and you're going to treat this with urgency. You hear them. And then the third thing is describe, which is sort of your method on, like, act on, understand. You have to just convey the plan. You don't have to say yes to everything. You don't have to say you're going to fix it, but as long as there's a plan, right? Communicate. You want to follow up with a very specific timeline on when you're going to get back to them, and kind of describe that plan. That communication is really important, of what's going to happen next, what they're going to expect from you, when they're going to hear back from you. And obviously it's important to keep up to those timelines. So, Micah, I think we've talked about the framework, but there is another thing about that's the language, right? What language should you use with working with an upset customer, or any customer for that matter?
Well, I really liked what you said there about the urgency. So if you can use language, specifically in that stage, if you can use language like, I'm the person now who's going to fix this, who's going to take care of you now. Here's my direct extension if you ever need me. Stuff like that is very reassuring. Overall, there are phrases that work better and worse. Like, well, to be honest with you, well, to be perfectly frank, well, full disclosure. So nobody means anything bad by it. But if you say, like, if you went up to the judge and you were speeding, and then you said to the judge, I mean, allegedly, right? You said, well, to be perfectly honest with you, well, what's the judge supposed to think? Up to that moment, you were lying through your teeth. So it's the same working with customers. Talking about money, I would never say, well, you owe $540 million and 33 cents. You could get the same point across by saying, our records indicate a balance of $540 million and 33 cents, and let them check there. And it's just a little gentler. And then very specifically, especially in service recovery, try to avoid defensive language. Don't say, that's not true. Oh, that's not what happened. Oh, I've worked with her 38 years and she's never acted that way that I've ever seen. Instead, use more inclusive, inclusive is not exactly the right word, but collaborative, more neutral language. Well, it appears that you heard Jim say that it would arrive before 10 a.m. Okay, and they can say, yeah, that's what I heard him say. And then you can say, perhaps Jim was speaking about weekdays and not Christmas Day or whatever it is. But neutral language can be useful. Then there's some things that just are generally useful working with customers. If a customer thanks you, if I said to Ria, who's been so helpful with this, I said, "Oh, Ria, thank you so much for setting this up." And Ria said, "No problem." So there are two things wrong with that. Number one, it's dismissing the effort that the customer put in to thank you. So better to say, "Well, you're welcome," or "My pleasure," or even, "Well, thank you for being a customer or giving me the chance to solve this." But if you say "No problem," you're kind of dismissing the effort. The other thing with "No problem" is if I asked all of you right now, real quick, whatever you do, don't think about a big pink elephant. All right? Don't think about it. Don't think about it. So, Disha, what are you thinking about right now?
The pink elephant.
Absolutely. That's what almost everyone has told me. Now, there was one woman who said French fries, and it was right before lunch. So I think that was totally valid as well. But other than the French fries, most people tell me they are now triggered to think about a pink elephant. So that's the same issue with "No problem." That little "no" isn't powerful enough to erase the specter of problem which you've now brought in. So those are some language tips I find helpful.
Yeah, that is very important. I didn't think about not using "no problem." I think that just naturally comes when you're trying to help someone. So that's a very important tip, Micah. Thanks for doing that.
Also,
So,
this wasn't in the question.
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This wasn't in
No,
the
no, go
question,
ahead.
but tone of voice matters also.
Yeah.
Now, by and large, when you answer the phone or when someone comes in person, you want to smile. So you can tell right now. Hold on a second. Am I smiling? Am I smiling? Am I smiling? Am I smiling? Of course I am. You hear all that treble? Now, if I not smiling, I sound more like Eeyore. And I need to keep this quote a little short so Disney doesn't bust me. But I sound more like Eeyore, right? "My tail's not much to look at, but I'm attached to it, I suppose." So the rule is to always smile on the phone, right? Or in person. There is an exception to this, though. If a customer says, "Oh, I'm really upset, you had this obstruction in front of my parking space and I slipped on it and I broke my leg." You don't want to be all like, "Well, I'm really sorry to hear about that," right? You want to get more in their emotional space.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the mirroring technique, right? I think it's, again, important with customers, but as you said, right, even with your partner, with your spouse, right, to make that empathy be known, right, you definitely want to mirror both the body language and the tone of voice. So yeah, that's amazing. I did want to go back to what I originally introduced this as the service recovery paradox, right, where we're saying that customers who've actually experienced a service recovery service issue and then have been turned around successfully become loyalists. So why do you think customers who are fully turned around via service recovery likely to become company loyalists, and compared to if nothing bad had ever happened before? And for that matter, is that statement kind of true across the board, or does it vary on the situation, sort of the type of incident, event, and so forth?
So my understanding, let me answer the second part first. My understanding is it varies a lot depending on the type of incident. So smaller things, and then you go over the top, fixing them. Those are the most likely to have the happy result here. Your surgeon, you cut off the wrong leg and then you apologize very nicely. I have not heard that that's entirely successful. So it does depend on industry. It does depend on the situation. Absolutely. Now, why? Well, I have a theory, and it's that they now know that you're far more than a fair weather friend, right? Most companies can handle things if everything goes smoothly, and good for them for having them go smoothly, right? But only a really exceptional company can take care of things in an emotionally appropriate way when something really goes wrong. That's my theory.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. So, do we want to jump to some of the live questions here? Let's do that. Okay, so I have a question from Rashmi. How can one win back trust with a customer who has had a very disappointing experience previously and give them a truly fulfilling experience?
Do you want to take that? Do you want me to take it?
Why don't you start and I can add?
Well, I would use my mama technique, or I would use Disha's DDD technique. And I would also worry about I would also pay attention to the language, to what I call these spark words that can make the whole thing go better. So they've just found your company to just give me the runaround, right? So if then I say, or you say, "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that," and then pause a little bit and then say, and then they'll be like, "Yeah, you should be sorry to hear it," or whatever. But then you say, "I truly am, and I am the person to fix things up for you now. And here's how to reach me." And the tide has turned. It might take some time to regain your trust, Mr. or Ms. Customer, but I am here to do it, and I'm committed to doing it. I think that can be helpful. I think that's what your question is. Like, they just have a bad view of your company at this point. So you need to do at least two things. You need to fix their problem, and you need to give them that reassurance from the beginning that you really will fix their problem and that you acknowledge what they've gone through already.
Yeah, totally, Micah. And then the intention here and the sincerity and the genuineness you do this with, like, sees through, right? So when you're on that call with a customer, you're just like, yes, language is very important, but if you're just saying that because you're reading from a script, like, I think the other side can feel that. So the genuineness and that sincerity that, yes, I'm sorry for what you're feeling, but here's what I'm going to do, like using the two frameworks you've described, but putting that sincerity totally helps. And then, yes, I think you mentioned about time. Your first objective in that first call is to make sure that a customer at least feels like, yes, they're talking to the right person, and you're going to like follow up on your commitment. But then it's going to take time that you're actually going to deliver on that commitment.
Absolutely.
That's going to help them like turn them around. All right, so the next question from Stephen Mann. What should a CS agent do when they can tell that following a company policy is making an unhappy customer even unhappier? Wow, that's an interesting one.
So, this is the thing. If you work at an absolutely terrible company with terrible policies, there may not be anything you can do. Every company, I'm sorry, but every company in our world says somewhere in their mission statement that they're going to provide exemplary, world-class, right? World-class customer service. But if they say that and they're paying you like very little an hour, and they're stealing your overtime from you, and they're similarly extremely rigid about what you can do to help a customer, then you're really stuck. If that isn't the situation, then you can say, "Oh, I'm super sorry. We thought that this approach would serve most of our customers, but clearly this is an occasion where it doesn't. And also, I am going to bring to my boss that maybe the actual approach itself should be revised." Something like that. Disha, what do you think?
Yeah, I think totally acknowledging that, well, this is the policy, but I see sort of that why it's not applicable in this situation, right? I'm going to give a quick example of what happened with me in this airline industry, right? It was we all know how it is to deal with customer service in the airline space, especially during these times. I had one day, like a 24-hour return flight with this leading airline. I won't name names. They canceled my flight there,
because of some weather conditions, some reason.
So
So
Disha, you'd
I
rather
was
that they just took off and crashed, right?
no,
Oh,
I know
okay.
I would
I'm sorry,
rather
that's not
not
where you're
that,
going with.
but yeah, I totally not going there. But when I called them for a refund, they told me, okay, because our flight there was canceled, we can give you a refund. But our flight coming back was like on time, so no refund there, right? We'll just give you half the refund. And I'm like, like my flight there back was within 24 hours. I was literally going for a day trip, and you didn't take me there. So how am I going to fly back? Like, oh, that's our
Oh
policy.
my word, yeah. Oh my
Oh my,
goodness. I've never heard this one, but this is amazing.
it is. And I'm just like, okay, are you even listening? And he couldn't do anything, and I kind of just gave up. But that's kind of a ridiculous policy. And I think what, yes, that person could have done is just empathize with this and kind of said, like, I am going to escalate this. I am going to go to the right people, right? I'm going to file a complaint. I'm going to do everything I can do on your behalf because I can see how ridiculous this policy is. That would have made me feel better. Whether like I got a refund or not, that's not important. But just him acknowledging that would have helped. Yeah.
That's an amazing one. That's
Yeah,
really something.
that is a funny one. All right. So next question. This is from Finn. Um, if we offer a gift card, coupon, or over amount refund to a disappointed or unhappy customer, is it perceived as a bribe? I mean, sometimes such an offer may look like a bribe, like we try to mute the customer on social media.
What do you think?
I don't necessarily think it's a bribe. I think when I go and complain on social media, most of the time it's because like, I've kind of exhausted the other avenues, or I think that's right now the only way. But I'm also complaining because I want an action to be taken. I want somebody to acknowledge that something wrong was done with me, and oh, here is what we can do to make up for it. Like a lot of times you can't really go back sometimes and fix things, right? Like we all wish there was time travel to go back and do that. But like, what can you do going forward that just makes me acknowledge that, yes, you regret what happened and here is what you're going to do to fix it or make me feel better.
So what you said is
Yeah.
exactly the problem is you can't go back in time. So the theory here is that if you put everything back the way it should have been in the first place, the customer still loses. So you want to give them something extra. Now, on really tiny things, then I don't think you necessarily need to give them something extra. But if it's significant, it took a bunch of their time, or uh, your pen that you manufactured ruined their best pair of pants, whatever it is, then just getting things the way they should have been in the first place is better than nothing, right? But it's not necessarily going to change the story they're telling about your company. So what will change it? Well, I think sometimes and you guys are going to think I'm kidding, but I'm not. Just the pleasure of working with a nice person to resolve it and to use Disha's urgency to resolve it might be enough. But in other cases, it will benefit from something additional. So I wouldn't think that these offers are a problem unless they're really silly. I mean, your $80,000 car. Okay, your boss's $80,000 car. One of the wheels falls off when you drove it out of the dealership, and maybe you need to do something more than give them a $5 gift card, right? There is some proportionality that is important to keep in mind.
Yeah, so Micah, you work with a lot of SaaS and software technology companies too, right? I think this question.
Yeah, but what's the best one, Disha?
Freshworks. What do you think? All right. Well, where I was going with this is, I think this question is very relevant in the software SaaS world, right? Because as customer service agents, we can't immediately fix a problem because we have to go back to development. There is a whole cycle that happens, right? If you have to fix a bug, release a patch, and get them change. And sometimes that's not even possible in the time frame, right? In the SaaS world, there's so much other dependencies, that there are cycles that you have to follow. So you may be saying kind of no a lot, that no, we can't do this, no, we can't do that. Sometimes there's something else you kind of need to offer when you're saying too many no's. And yeah, I don't like, Micah, if you have any sort of extra additional suggestions there, but to me, it feels like you have to meet them somewhere and be like, yeah, we can do 1, 2, 3, but you know what? Like, this is the one I'm going to really go to bat for you. I'm going to talk to a product person, or I'm going to get them on the phone, or you know what? I'm going to give you a free ticket to our Refresh conference that's coming up. What do you think about that?
Well, that's great, but I think the most obvious thing would be in a SaaS situation to extend their subscription, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you want them to anyway, right?
Right.
I think that's the most obvious. Now, the deal with software is probably that you don't guarantee it's going to be perfect and have every possible bell and whistle. So I think that's what you're talking about. I'm going to go to bat to have this thing or that thing added. The going to bat for them, if it's something that hasn't been offered up to that point, I think that's kind of a value add in itself, right?
Yeah. I think that totally is. You can't do that for every, but maybe you can find something that you can. But right, yeah, service credits, or talking about, we know this is really stopping and interrupting your work. Let me see what I can do to, give you maybe, or extend it your
But also
subscription
remember,
program.
if they're asking for a new feature that you didn't think of, you should be whether you actually do it or not, you should be thankful for the idea, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think obviously we all have had customers who've challenged us, and that's the partnership we all desire and crave for, right? Okay, so let's see what we have next year. Meeta is asking, what can you do to prevent customer flare-ups? Are there any leading indicators of an impending outburst? Sounds like she's asking, how do you just even prevent customers from getting upset, right?
Well, so there is a lot of sentiment analysis now on phone calls, and I think emails as well, though I think in email it's kind of obvious what's going on, but on phone Disha, I'm not sure I found that to be valuable, but Disha, have you? I mean, I don't have an opinion. Well,
the sentiment on
I don't
email?
have an opinion one way or the other about sentiment analysis at this point, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think, and actually Freshworks has that too, right? Just some natural language processing, to like looking for those keywords. Yes, that's important, right? That the customer is getting impatient. We need to deal with urgency. But yeah, I think looking for some of those triggers, and then even when you're talking on the phone, if they're interrupting you, or you just can feel from their voice that they are getting there. It's important to recognize and make sure they feel like they're being heard. You can go back to the MAMA framework or DDD framework there, right? Even before that outburst has happened.
Absolutely. And some other ways to not exacerbate things. I had an employee named Lee. Well, let's call her Lisa because that's her name. Okay, it's very close to her name. It's not really. Okay. Lisa was a great employee, but she did have this one thing she would do. If a customer was getting more and more agitated, or Lisa would say, well, I'm not going to argue with you. But what do you think Lisa was doing at that point?
Oh my God. I think she was just making him more frustrated. That okay,
Yeah, I
do
think
you
she
think
was
I'm being
either arguing
unreasonable?
or
That's
at least
yeah,
bringing
yeah,
in the specter of the idea
yeah,
of argument. So
yeah.
in the early stages of a customer's flare-up starting, there are ways to make
Mhm.
it worse, and there are ways, which we've been talking about
Yeah.
making it better. I think like saying, I hear you, or isn't that the truth? I mean, I think things like
Yeah.
that, and it's a regional differences which ones you want to use, are
Yeah.
valuable. Now, let me back up to the apology thing. I have a
Yeah.
great friend who says that she's mad at me because everyone's read my books. I happen to have a copy here. And now
Yeah.
that when she gets on the phone or someone, that the company always apologizes to her, and she's like, I don't want that. I want it fixed. So
Mm.
so what's going on here? Well, you need to know your customer, and I know that's hard because it's maybe the first time you talk to them, but just keep things in mind. And sometimes the more the engineering kind of people, they don't necessarily care as much about the apology,
Mhm.
so play these things by ear. I think also if you have like a long, like in a B2B context, and you have a long relationship established with someone, um, you may not need to do as much apologizing as I've been suggesting. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. You definitely need to know the customer, and yeah, I've worked for SaaS companies that like really cater to the developer community. It
Mm.
is very different, what they're expecting. A lot of times they don't even want to talk to you on the phone. They just want to say,
Oh,
just
sure.
tell me when this is going to be fixed, right? So yeah, I think understanding that is important. But perhaps just acknowledging it with one line that,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I see where you're coming from,
Oh,
right?
that's good.
I see the issue. That helps totally.
Another thing
All
to watch
right.
out for here. I mean, I have a zillion things to watch out for here, but those of you who are rather tech-minded and are in support, be careful about saying things like I said, or as I explained yesterday, or in an email. I've gotten this as well. Like, as you'll see at the bottom of your email, Micah, my email, Micah. I'm like, well, dude, just bring it up to the top of the email this time. Don't
Yeah,
tell a
yeah,
customer they're not listening or paying attention up to your standards, right?
yeah,
Just tell them again. And if they really aren't getting it, because some customers just aren't as smart as you are, right? Or at least not as technically adept as you are.
yeah,
If you keep
yeah,
telling them and they keep not getting it, here, point them to an explainer video or try a different way.
yeah. I
I think
think the other thing also I've noticed, Micah, just on that same lines is, um, you know, in tech companies, again, customer service agents quoting documentation. Oh, like, what you're asking is unreasonable as per our documentation.
Oh, okay, sure.
And that again is like, okay, who is
Yeah.
reading your documentation? But, the way to say that is, here's how we do it. There's more detail here in the
Absolutely.
documentation. Here's the link, rather than assuming, hey, you should have read the documentation.
Exactly. And everyone, you should know that the word policy is a trigger word. Now, I'm not really sure what was so wrong about saying policy, but now everyone has read
Mhm,
everywhere that if someone says policy, they are a heartless, horrible support
mhm.
person. So just don't say it. Use what
Yeah,
Disha just said as another way to say it.
yeah. Okay. Nice. I like this. Let's see what the next question here is. Okay, how to deal with an upset customer? This is from Gauri, who has already started to berate the company on social media. That's a
Ah!
good one. You're a social media expert, so I'll let you take this, Michael.
Oh, come on. Come on. We're all self-styled social media experts. So this is really hard. A couple of things you want to watch out for. I don't know how many of you know about the Streisand effect. So this is, you can look it up in Wikipedia. They have a nice little piece on it. So Barbara Streisand, one of her many houses is in coastal California. Uh, and it looks like a lovely place. Now, the fact that I've seen the picture of her backyard is because of what gave the Streisand effect its name. So
Mm,
the photographer had taken 1,000, as I remembered, 1,000 pictures, maybe from a helicopter, of the coastline in her area for a coastline erosion project, trying to show the extent of erosion and make it better or mitigate it. One of those bazillion pictures was of Barbara's very beautiful backyard, her pool and everything. Now, there are no people in the picture, by the way. So Barbara, or who knows, Barbara's people sued the photographer to have him take the one picture out of the database. Bad move. He put it on t-shirts. He used it as a fundraising opportunity. Now everyone knows what Barbara's backyard looks like. So that's called the Streisand Effect, where if you go after the customer, you can increase the attention the issue gets. So watch out for that. I think if they're berating you on social media, you probably have a way to reach out to them, right? You can say, get right back to me by DM, or here's a phone number you can use. There are limitations on doing this if you are a regulated industry like a bank or a pharmaceutical company or a drugstore, but there is also technology that allows you to get into a secure space to do this. Now, when my company was much smaller and the internet was much newer, after I treated a customer great, I would ask them to take down the initial posts. I would do that.
Totally.
Nowadays, I think that's tricky, and I'm not sure that really works anymore. It might exacerbate them, especially if they're not as fully satisfied as you think they should be at that point. What do you think? What do you think?
I think that there's no harm asking. And it may be different in like a B2B if you're dealing with a business versus you're dealing with a consumer. We actually recently had a great example where our chief customer officer, Harry Ratnam, actually turned around a customer who berated us on
I heard
Twitter.
about this. Okay, sure.
Yeah. And I obviously won't name the company, but him coming in and saying, hey, I'm the chief customer officer. I'm responsible for the service you are getting or the non-service and your experience. And I want an opportunity to change it. And, if you can give me that opportunity, I want to really, turn this around for you. And we did that. We changed him around, and then he was asked to take down actually not just issue like another comment of like what we did, and he did that. So I think this is an opportunity. If you can turn something around of somebody who's super upset on social media, and then get them to really become your champion and kind of say like, hey, look at what this company did. That's a great story, and that is going to give you a lot of marketing and brand recognition.
I agree, and my business is still small enough that if someone said something horrible about me and I made them happy, I would after that ask them if they could update their post.
Yeah, totally.
You working with B2B. They should understand, but working with B2C, understand that not all customers are business people, and they don't realize just how hurtful on both a personal and a business level this stuff can be. Another thing about these social things, I've worked with, I think it's mostly restaurants who think this, but I've worked with multiple restaurants who call me and say, Micah, there's this terrible post about a meal someone had, and I know it was my competitor down the street. I'm sorry, folks, it probably wasn't. There are exceptions. There are documented exceptions, but by and large, I'm sorry to say it probably wasn't your competitor.
Yeah. For most part, you want to take all these complaints seriously, and I think in B2C there is the effect of a community, right? If you have few negatives, you just want to make sure how many positives are you going to have. Yeah. All right. So we move on.
By the way, if you are a tiny company, and I'm probably not supposed to say this, if you're a tiny company, it's hard to like turn around TripAdvisor and Yelp and all that. However, if you're small with a small market, if you have like 10 friends and they feel in their heart that they want to help you, and you say, well, the place that would help me most is on Google reviews. 10 good Google reviews is probably enough to help. Just take that under advisement.
Yeah, that's great.
Google reviews are
Okay.
highly unscientific. They were only put in because Google hates anyone else getting any eyeballs, and so they didn't want Yelp and so forth to get any
Okay.
eyeballs. So that's the
Yeah.
deal on Google reviews.
That's great. Okay, that's good to know. Good tip. All right, so let's see what Sebastian is asking. How can agents respond
Hi,
to
Sebastian.
Hey. All right. Agents respond to requests from customers that they know cannot be provided, at least in the short term. Some customers may get defensive or upset when they hear that something they had requested is impossible. I think that's similar to what we discussed about not being able to deliver on feature requests, right, in tech companies. But yeah, I think generally, what do you do if you cannot really fulfill that request in the short term?
So all this stuff works together. I wouldn't necessarily take their initial response as what their end feeling is going to be. A lot of people will call you and say, "Oh my God, I will never work with you guys again if you don't get this to me by Friday." And you probably believe that, understandably, but you handle it pretty well. They think about the cost of switching companies. They think that in all the other ways, you're the best. And you have a track record with them that you're slowly building up. Well, I don't think they're necessarily going to leave, even if that's their threat at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Awesome. I think that's all the time we had, Micah.
That's a lot of good questions, guys. Thank
Okay.
you, Sebastian and Tom and everyone else.
Yeah, totally. This was a really good conversation and such a pleasure to talk to you. I was a bit nervous, talking to like an
What?
industry legend like this, but
I
you
was
made
scared
it
to
so
talk to you,
easy.
Disha.
All right, awesome.
No,
This was great. Thanks
we
for
all
doing this.
survived. We
Yeah,
all
did.
survived. Now, you guys can always reach me. You can always reach me. My thing's on the screen there. It's hard. It's probably kind of small. I can make it bigger. Hang on. But it's micahsolomon.com is my website. But what you really should do, right, Disha, is join Refresh Community, and then we can all ask each other everything, right?
Yeah, totally. More questions for Ask Micah. Go on the Refresh Community, and we will all be here to answer that.
Now that's ask with a K, not ASS with. So let's say it carefully. Ask Micah.
Ask Micah. Okay, all right. Well, everyone have a great holiday season, and talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.